All right. We have 4,000 to 8,000 blinds now. Smith raises to 18K and the cutoff with King-Jack offsuit. Sure. Negreanu calls small blind with 10-9 of spades. It's fine as well. And remember, these are the type of hands that we are now learning that we can call with from the small blind or the button. Marchese decides to call in the big blind with Queen 8 of hearts, which is fine. All right, flop comes Jack 10-8. 2 diamonds. It goes check, check, check. Let's see. What do we have here? Negreanu should definitely check this flop. He has a medium pair and a draw. It's a great hand to check. Marchese has bottom pair and a draw. He should definitely check. Now back to Smith. Should Smith bet the flop with King Jack? Probably. It's probably good enough to just bet this and get it in. The pot's already 60K. So I think if you bet something like 40K here and get jammed, you can easily call. There's also a ton of bad turn cards for you. So this is perhaps a spot where you should be betting. The only reason not to bet here is if Smith had some sort of a read that both players like their hands, and clearly both players are interested in this pot. So I get that maybe he had some sort of read that the players were more interested in this spot than normal. But I think this is a spot you just want to bet and get it in. You definitely want protection on the flop. It's so easy for the small blind to have some piece of this that's going to pay you. So I think this is a pretty easy spot to bet, typically. But he just checks. All right, turns to 10. Negreanu now has trips. He bets tiny. I would definitely bet bigger in Negreanu's shoes. I think it's actually mandatory to bet bigger. I feel like I've been a little bit critical of Negreanu in this stream, but I don't know why you would not bet bigger here. This is a spot where you should definitely have a lot of 10s. You also should have a lot of draws. And it would be fantastic to be able to push around the opponents. Notice also that whatever amount you bet is going to give your opponents great odds to call with their gut shots and stuff with their gut shots. And you really don't want your opponents to be getting a very, very good price with their gut shots. I do understand Negreanu has a really good hand, but this is a spot where the opponents are also both going to have something pretty reasonable. So I definitely like the idea of betting, but I would have bet bigger for sure. Marchese calls as he should with bottom pair and a draw. Smith now decides to raise. So Smith has probably deduced from Negreanu's small bet that Negreanu has some marginal junk. Okay? And that seems reasonable. Marchese calls. Also, you can deduce he doesn't have a hand that's good enough to raise. So Smith decides, okay, both players likely have very marginal made hands. So if both players have marginal made hands, I can raise this hand for value because it's likely the best hand. Negreanu then rips it. Does he rip it? Yeah, he basically puts him in. And they both fold. Wow, what a miserable spot to have to fold. I mean, what are you going to do? It's a horrible, horrible scenario. Cool spot, though, that's for sure. I'm trying to think. Like, if I was in Smith's shoes, I don't think I would have raised. So if I'm not raising there, then that makes the small bet really bad. But I guess if he knows his opponents are going to be overly aggressive to small bets, then betting small can make a lot of sense because then you're just getting them to put in a raise with all sorts of stuff. However, take a look at this spot, though. Take a look at it really well. Everyone in the chat saying, that makes his bet really good because he got raised. What's the alternative? What if he bet 50K on the turn, got called, and then bet 100K on the river and got called? How much does he win then? He wins 150K, right? Here, he wins 75K. Or call it 90K if you count the call by Marchese. So while this play did quote-unquote succeed, it actually didn't succeed as well as just betting big on the turn. So keep all that in mind. Once you get raised, you call or fold? I don't know. Is Negreanu ever bluffing? Probably not. So if he's balanced. So it's kind of interesting. I have ideas of players who I think bluff too infrequently. And against those players, I'm just more inclined to fold, right? And I have other ideas of players who I think are bluffing too frequently. And against those players, I'm way more inclined to call. But if you start from a very close to balanced point of view, call appropriately, and then adjust slightly one way or the other, that's usually going to work out best. So let's see. Would you fold here? Probably. Mainly because the king in your hand blocks the king-queen obvious bluff. Also, I mean, the fact you don't have any diamonds, I guess, is relevant. You'd like to have a... Oh, the turn was a diamond. I'm sorry. Wait a second. I got confused. Wait a second. Turn was the third diamond. I didn't see it. Does that change anything? Well, it makes me like his shove way worse, that's for sure. So yeah, now Negreanu just has trips. Because now when you get called, you're actually in bad shape. So this makes me actually like Smith's raise and then fold way better. Because now you get to protect on the turn, and then if you get jammed on, you can assume you're in pretty bad shape. So I actually like Smith's play way more now. And I think I dislike Negreanu's shove a little bit more too, because now when your opponents fold, they're often very near dead. Whereas when they call, you're in very bad shape. So yeah, I don't really like this play anymore. Let's see. Given the flushes there, yeah, it's a very easy fold by the king jack. Let's see. Can we go through some Hold'em resources calculator preflop spots? No, I do not use that program. That program is mainly good for short stack scenarios, and that's another thing that I outsource. For example, the float the turn push fold application was made using Hold'em resources calculator. It's good for very shallow stacked scenarios, and we're not playing that in these games. I don't actually think it's that useful of a program compared to a lot of other things we have available. And also, preflop is far from the end of the day. Because you're playing after the flop, right? Very rarely are we just looking at all-in preflop scenarios. That's not what we're dealing with most of the time. And if we are, you're better off using a program like ICMizer. But yeah, so given the turn's a diamond, I definitely do think Negreanu should bet, and I don't think he's necessarily trying to fold. I'm trying to think if this jam is actually that bad. It clearly does protect your equity, which is a real thing. I understand this. But I think when you get called, you're just going to be so screwed. Maybe he thinks that Smith basically never checks back a draw. But this is a board where, you, like, say you did have a low diamond draw or something, you definitely should check it back because it's so easy for you to be in bad shape. If you bet, because if you bet, you're just not getting folds very often. So, tough spot. Glad to see me playing more poker lately. I feel like I've played almost no poker recently. I played for the last week, but that's not a whole lot. And then my next trip, I'm not going to play a whole lot either. I'm going to Aria at the end of May, or middle of May. But I think I'm going to end up only playing 2 or 3 tournaments because I don't think the other ones are going to be very good. It's tough to find good high rollers is what it amounts to. Like, look at this table, right? I would not go buy into this table. That would be insane. All right. Here, Negreanu raises to 18K on the button with King-9 offsuit. Marchese calls small blind, Queen-Jack. This is a hand maybe he would want to 3-bet, but because of the stack sizes, he's maybe better off calling. And now Smith jams all in for 163K with Ace-Jack, and they both fold. That seems fine and standard. Notice that when it gets back to Smith, I'm sorry, when he gets back to Marchese, Marchese has to put in 140K to win a pot that's going to be, how much is this? 360? Is that right? So yeah, 140 divided by 360. Let's look at the pot odds real quick. 140 divided by 360 equals. So he only needs to win 38% of the time, but do not be looking at this and thinking, oh, that definitely means we have an easy call because Queen Jack's going to be something like 35% against everything. First off, you're going to be slightly behind in this scenario. And also, you really want to avoid situations that are close to neutral EV. And I imagine there's about 8 players left in this tournament with 5 getting paid. And you should definitely avoid spots like this. I had a hand like this in the 25K in Florida the other day, where I raise like something like cutoff or hijack with king queen, and then the big blind shoved, and that's he has shoved for I think 19 big blinds. In that scenario, I had to put in 17 to win 20, so to win 40. Is that right? I think it was 41 because there was a giant ante. So I need to win about 41% of the time, and I know king queen probably will. It's going to be close. So what factors sway me one way or the other when calling is reasonable? Well, first thing is how active have I been? And I had been very active. That's going to make me more inclined to call. Next factor, how often has the player who shoved, how often have they shoved in the recent past? If they've shoved a lot, I'm going to be way more inclined to call. In this situation, it just so happened that the opponent had been shoving a lot. So I'm opening a lot, he's shoving a lot, therefore I should have more equity than normal. So we have a very easy call. I called, he had ace king, and I lost. And then that player ended up winning another all-in with like pocket sixes against ace jack, and another one with, I think he had ace 10 against pocket nines, and then he made the final table with all the chips, and I did not. So whenever you're in those spots and you do call, and they do show you that they have ace king, a lot of people think, oh man, I should have folded, but that's not necessarily true. You have to pay attention to the hands they're showing up with on average. And when the guy got it all in like the other 4 times, I would have been roughly flipping in all of them, and just so happened to be on the wrong end of that one. But that is okay. Anyway, in this spot, what I'm trying to say is queen jack is never getting the right price to call, and neither is king 9. Notice here, though, they don't really have recent past on Smith's shoving strategy, but I'm sure they all have some experience playing with Smith to where they have some idea of what he's doing. And he is slightly more aggressive than normal, but not so aggressive to where either of those hands become calls. All right, Marchese raises to 18K with 10-9 offsuit on the button. Smith calls small blind. Notice here, Smith loves calling small blind. I don't think I was quite so aware of this. One thing I have observed playing with a lot of the best players is that they do not necessarily want to be playing the 3-bet all-in war, 3-betting to some amount and then facing a 4-bet. They're trying instead to call, see the flop, and play these 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 big blind pots. So just be aware of that. Okay, so Smith calls. Flop call. I don't think this is necessarily a good hand to call with either. 5-4 suited is quite weak. He also called with ace-7 offsuit earlier. Maybe he just thinks Marchese's opening too wide. But if he thinks Marchese's opening too wide in this spot, he should probably just jam this hand because he's going to have a lot of fold equity, right? Because he only has 20, 25 big blinds. So I'm kind of surprised he didn't jam this. Ghost of Him says, you really overfold in the small blind. Yeah, I don't think it's such a bad strategy, but most people do. All right, flop comes Jack 4-4. As Des said, good soul read here. He knew the 4 was coming. Marchese bets 15K into 52. Notice, again, very small C-bet. That's something I would love all of you to implement into your game. Smith then check raises to 40 and gets the fold. Notice here, this is a spot where you should be check raising more hands than only the nuts. So what are your bluffs on Jack 4-4, no suits? Everyone sit here and think about it for a second. And ask yourself, am I actually check raising to 40K here with any bluffs? You're probably not, right? So this is a scenario where you have to look hard for bluffs. What are logical bluffs here? Well, I think stuff like Queen 10 of clubs, hearts, or spades is probably good enough to call. Overcards are definitely good enough to call. The hands you want to be check raising here are going to be hands like 6-5 with backdoor flush draws, or 7-5 with backdoor flush draws, or whatever other low suited hands he has. Those are going to be the best ones to check raise. And you should be check raising with those. Let's see. Now that we have Monker, M-O-N-K-E-R, solver, is flatting in the small blind still okay in the cash games? Well, it depends on the scenarios, right? The reason calling in the tournaments is often good is because you're facing very small raise sizes. When you're facing small raise sizes and there are antes in play, that's when you should be flatting more. when you are facing big raise sizes, like say you're playing 1-2 and someone makes it $10, you should almost never be flatting the small blind, because you're going to be out of position for a very big pot. Whereas if you're out of position for a small pot, getting great pot odds, that's when you want to be calling quite wide. So it definitely depends on the scenario. One thing I have noticed, I've been making these daily videos on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook called Little Poker Advice. And a lot of people, while I do try to give very 1-minute concise videos, because that's what Instagram caps you at, a lot of people want 1-minute answers to things that require way more than 1 minute of discussion. For example, when you're in the small blind facing a raise, is it okay to call? Well, first things first. What kind of pot odds are we getting? If you're playing 1-2 and they make it $10, no, fold almost everything. You should play almost literally nothing. If they make it $20, you should play almost nothing, like aces and kings and queens and ace king, and that's it. If they make it a min raise, though, which hand should you not be playing at that point? Well, the hands you should not be playing are the ones that are not going to realize their equity well. So those are going to be hands like King 4. King 4 should probably be a fold even for a min raise. But as we see, 5-4 suited in this spot is probably close enough to reasonable. So Jose says, it depends, answer is best. Yeah, but it's not optimal. People like to have good, concise information, and I've found a bunch of things we can discuss in 1 minute. So that's always fun. All right. Let's see. Marchese raises to 17K in the cutoff with a 7. Cats calls small blind with Jack 9 of hearts. We saw someone else do this earlier. I forget. I think it was either Marchese or Smith. I forget which one it was. Negreanu 3-bets to 76K with ace 10 of hearts. So I think ace 10 of hearts is usually going to be better off called. We kind of discussed this a second ago. Like why the same reason Cass is calling with Jack 9 of hearts. I think ace 10 of hearts is usually pretty good to call too. Because when you do 3-bet this hand, and you get jammed on, and notice here, both players have very good jam stacks, right? Ace 10 of hearts is very, very close to break even. And you want to avoid these very, very close to break even calls. If you do get jammed here, by the way, you probably should call versus Marchese for sure. I'm not so sure against Cats. You can maybe make a snug fold against him. Whoa, what else? If you're going to be 3-betting this, I'd much prefer to 3-bet the offsuit one. I know you don't get to pick your hands, but you do get to pick your actions. And I think the offsuit King 10 offsuits are going to be better to, well, the offsuit King 10s are going to be better to 3-bet than this suited one. It's just such a disaster when someone jams on you. And also putting in one big blind more with a hand that's going to dominate the preflop raiser and the caller a lot is often pretty strong. And notice here, both players fold, right? So Marchese has a hand that's drawing very near dead, and he ends up making the very correct play. Cats was very dominated, and he ends up making the very correct play, right? Well, very dominated with the flush at least. So this is a spot where I think Negreanu would have been best off calling. Muggy says, don't you think ace 10 suited was a bluff? All right, ask yourself think about that question, right? Which better hands are going to fold? Because that's what a bluff is, right? We are making better hands fold. Do you think either of these players with 25 or 30 big blind stacks are going to fold ace jack or pocket nines? Like, no way in hell. So it's definitely not a bluff. Next question is, though, are they going to be getting it in with significantly worse stuff? Like ace 9 offsuit. Or ace 7 offsuit like we see here. Or jack 9 suited. Also, no. So this is not a bluff or a value bet. It's essentially a protection raise. And there is merit in that. But that's why you typically want to be doing that with the offsuit hands, because they flop so poorly. You protect your equity immediately by raising and picking up the pots. But the problem with these shallow stacks is that they are going to jam very, very close to correctly. And I think you're just opening yourself up in this spot to get crushed. When you make a 67K, by the way, you got to call if Marchese shoves. Let's try to show us this. We will have to put in 215 minus 67. So we'll have to put in we'll call it 150 to win 430, his 215 plus our 215 plus an additional 25. So that is 430 plus 25 is 430 plus 20, 555. So 148 divided by 455 equals. We need to win 32% of the time when we get jammed on. I would, should I pull up Equilab? Let's see. I'll pull up Equilab. It might take a second. We're running lots of programs over here, so it may take a second to pull up Equilab. But you're going to see that ace-10 of hearts is always getting very, very close to our required 32% equity. So we have ace-10 suited. Then what is he going to be shoving with? Let's just give him a real strong range, which is probably not accurate, but maybe it is. We see here against a real strong range, we have 36% equity, right? If his range gets wider, our equity is only going to go up. So if his range is strong, when he jams, we still have to call. But we don't really want to call. Let's see how ace-10 offsuit does. See how ace-10 offsuit is a little bit lower in the dumpster, right? Which I think makes it a little bit better to bluff with, because when we're folding that, it's better, right? I mean, this is the break-even chip EV scenario. I understand that there are payout implications, which is why you would need to fold ace-10 offsuit, and why you don't want to fold ace-10 suited, because we need to be 33% or 32% to justify calling, and we're way up here at 36%. When your equity, in the worst case scenario, which is what I have here when he's only jamming good hands, in the worst case scenario, when your equity is 36%, you just have to still call it off. Whereas the ace-10 offsuit, you can justify folding. So that's why ace-10 offsuit's a way better 3-bet in this spot, if you intend to fold. Maybe Negreanu intended to call. If he intended to call, then I guess it's fine. But I still think calling's probably just going to be slightly better. Hyper says, what about ICM? Well, that's what we just talked about. The payout jumps are very, very relevant. But when you just have so much equity, you can't justify folding. I think a lot of people look at payout jumps and think, oh man, I need to be 50% or 60% to call, but that's nowhere near true. Also, there are at least 8 people in the tournament with 5 getting paid, and Negreanu has a nice chip stack. When you have a nice chip stack, you should be way less inclined to make big folds, because if Negreanu loses 200K here, he still has plenty. So ICM applies way less to Negreanu than it does to other people calling off. Like say the stacks were reversed. Say Negreanu had 215 and Marchese had 950. Then Negreanu should be way less inclined to call off. And again, way less inclined to make the 3-bet in the first place. All right, let's go through another hand or two, then we'll call it a day. Catch raises 17K, 10-9 in the cutoff, 10-9 suited. Negreanu calls button with queen-6 suited. What? I don't know what's happening here. All right, Smith calls 8-5 of spades in the big blind, sure. Flop comes 10, 9, 4. Cat's continuation bets big with his 2-pair and gets folds. I'm just looking at this, trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe Negreanu's looking to float a lot of flops. Maybe he thinks Cass is super weak on the flop. That's a reason to do this. But definitely just have to fold on the flop. Should Cass have done something different on the flop? Pot was 63, he bet 48. I'm fine with the big size here, but I think he probably would have been a little bit better off going slightly smaller. All right, is Equilab more accurate than Poker Stove? I don't even know if you can get Poker Stove anymore, but Equilab, just Google Equilab, is completely for free. There's another program called Power Equilab, which is definitely a much more robust, advanced program, but you do have to pay for that one. But regular Equilab is completely free. I try to show all of you mostly tools that are free. And say there's a paid version of Equilab. I don't even, like, where do you even get the paid version? There's not even a paid version around. Perhaps you are referring to Power Equilab, which is a different program. It's important to realize that programs are different. Power Equilab is a paid program. Equilab, Poker Strategy Equilab is free. And definitely get Equilab. Don't deal with Poker Stove. Let's see. All right, let's go for another hand. Marchese raises 18K on the button with ace-8 offsuit. Cats calls 7-6 of hearts. It comes 10, 8, 3. Cats bets 33K into 48K. So wait, Cats is leading. So Cats leads with his draw. Should Marchese just jam this flop? I think it's probably very close. When Cats leads, his range should be mostly draws and made hands, and you beat some of those made hands. Maybe you just call and then see what develops, looking to fold to additional aggression if you think Cats is going to be really straightforward. So I don't know. Apparently we don't have the rest of this hand. Check, check on the turn. And then we don't get to see the river. Well, that's okay. Let's see if I can find the timestamp. Hour 23 in. Give me just 1 second. I'm trying to pull this up on my end. So it goes check, check on the... Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever made my hand history did it wrong on the flop. I think it went check, check on the flop. Cats bets the turn. Yeah, I'm missing a little bit here. Check, check, flop. Turn is 4 of clubs. And then 4 of spades, and then check, check, river. That's what happened. Okay, check, check, flop. Cats bets turn, and then crappy river for Cats. Because if Cats leads the turn, and then the river's another 4, that's going to make Marchese call with all of his 10s and all of his 8s. So pretty rough spot, but I think you just have to keep bluffing here. There are definitely times where you just have to continue bluffing, and that's often when you have the very near bottom of your range. And here he does. Now, if he did bluff here, he was going to get called. And a lot of people would look at this and say, oh, that's a bad bluff because you got called. But you just have to bluff in this spot. And you're also betting with your 4s, right? If you're never betting with a 4, then yeah, I guess you can check everything. But you definitely want to keep betting with your 4s, and you would want to keep betting with your 10s. So this is a spot where I think Carey just has to go for the bluff, even knowing the bluff's going to fail a lot of the time. Something a lot of people have a hard time getting their head around is that if your bluff is going to fail a lot, that's fine because you're getting paid every time you're value betting. And if you structure your range appropriately, then you're going to be fine because you're getting paid. What do we think of an overbet? I don't really like it. This is a spot where when Marchese checks behind on the flop, he has some sort of a marginal value hand, like a 10 or an 8. Should a 10 or an 8 fold when the board runs off a complete brick and another complete brick? No, they should be calling. So this is a spot where I think if you bet, you need to be betting small for the most part. All right, so that's going to be it for today. After this, they combine to a final table of 7. Here's our final table lineup. We have some of the same players, some additional players, and let me look at my schedule. I think I'll probably stream again tomorrow. I need to go through these hand histories, and you all make it easier for me because if I tell you all I'm going to do it, I have to do it. So let's see what we're looking at tomorrow. Tomorrow, there's nothing on my schedule. I have to write an article for a magazine. Besides that, I have nothing. So we're going to stream again. Let's do it again. Same time tomorrow, roughly 2 p.m. Eastern. I'll be here. We'll continue going through this final table. Thanks a lot. Enjoy your games. Good luck with everything. Be nice to each other. It's very important. Be happy. And I'll talk to you next time.